The deep space monitoring station of the Zephyrian Empire hummed with activity as countless signals from a distant blue planet filled their receivers. Admiral Kekstar stood before the massive display screens, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he watched the strange transmissions with growing amusement. The beings on this world called themselves humans, and from what he could see, they were the weakest species he had ever encountered. Commander Velsh approached his superior with a data pad clutched in his clawed hands. The intelligence officer had been studying human communications for weeks now, and his findings were almost too good to believe. These creatures spent their time watching stories about romance and friendship, caring for small furry animals, and discussing something they called feelings with endless enthusiasm. Kekstar clicked his mandibles together in what passed for laughter. Among his kind. On the screens before them, humans were shown hugging each other, crying at sad movies, and spending enormous amounts of resources to save individual members of other species. Their military broadcasts showed soldiers helping civilians, building schools, and distributing food rather than conquering territory or eliminating enemies. The Admiral had conquered 12 star systems for the Zephyrian Empire, each time facing desperate resistance from species fighting for their survival. Yet these humans seemed more concerned with protecting something they called the environment than building proper weapons. Their ships looked more like floating research stations than warships, and their communications were filled with talk of peace, cooperation, and understanding. Velsh activated another display showing human entertainment broadcasts. Creatures on screen were laughing at harmless pranks, competing in games where nobody seemed to get seriously hurt, and telling stories where conflicts were resolved through talking rather than violence. The humans even had special words for avoiding harm to others and seemed to feel genuine distress when any living thing suffered. Deep in space near the edge of the human solar system, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, humanity's first diplomatic vessel, designed specifically for first contact scenarios. The ship had detected unusual energy signatures 3 days ago, and now they were finally close enough to attempt communication with whatever had been observing them. Morrison was a career diplomat who had spent 15 years mediating conflicts between Earth's various nations and colonies. His crew included Lisa Carter, a specialist in xenolinguistics who had developed the protocols for communicating with unknown species, and Dr. Kevin Brooks, a xenobiologist whose job was to understand alien behavior patterns and cultural frameworks. Bridge fell silent as their communications array picked up a response to their peaceful greeting. The alien vessel that decloaked before them was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Harmony, with weapon ports that could reduce their ship to atoms in seconds. Yet Morrison felt genuinely excited, rather than afraid, as he prepared for humanity's first conversation with another intelligent species. Lisa worked frantically at her station, running the alien language through translation matrices while Dr. Brooks analyzed their ship design and energy signatures for clues about their psychology and development level. Within hours, they had established basic communication with the vessel's commander, who identified himself as Admiral Kekstar of the Zephyrian Empire. Morrison presented himself with the same enthusiasm he would show to a new neighbor, offering gifts of Earth music, literature, and art as tokens of friendship. He spoke about humanity's dreams of joining a galactic community, sharing knowledge and culture with other species, and working together to explore the mysteries of the universe. Dr. Brooks prepared detailed files about Earth's biosphere, human achievements in science and medicine, and their history of gradually learning to resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than warfare. He was particularly proud of humanity's recent centuries of peace and their efforts to preserve other species and restore damaged ecosystems. Lisa transmitted samples of human languages, showing their complexity and beauty while demonstrating humanity's love of communication and storytelling. She included children's songs, poetry, and recordings of humans expressing joy, wonder, and compassion for other living beings. Admiral Kekstar received these transmissions with growing confidence that this would be the easiest conquest in Zephyrian history. The humans had actually sent them detailed information about their world's defenses, which appeared to be minimal and focused entirely on peaceful purposes. Their military seemed to exist mainly for rescue operations and disaster relief rather than actual warfare. The alien commander made what he considered a generous offer, demanding only that humanity surrender their oceanic territories and accept Zephyrian governance over their spacefaring activities. In exchange, humans would be allowed to continue their peaceful existence under proper supervision, protected from the harsh realities of galactic politics. Morrison politely declined the offer and requested time to discuss the matter with Earth's leadership. He explained that humans preferred to make important decisions collectively and needed to ensure that any agreement would benefit both species equally. He suggested establishing a joint commission to explore areas of mutual cooperation and cultural exchange. Kekstar interpreted this response as exactly what he expected from such a weak species. The humans were clearly terrified, but trying to buy time while they figured out how to surrender with minimal loss of dignity. Their leader was probably consulting with others, not out of strength, but because none of them had the courage to make decisions alone. Dr. Brooks continued transmitting information about human culture, including detailed histories of their greatest achievements in art, science, and philosophy. He wanted the aliens to understand that humanity had much to offer as partners rather than subjects, and that their peaceful nature was a strength rather than a weakness. The xenobiologist was particularly careful to emphasize humanity's recent success in eliminating warfare, poverty, and environmental destruction through cooperation and technological advancement. He showed how humans had learned to resolve disputes through understanding rather than violence, and how this had led to unprecedented prosperity and happiness. Admiral Kekstar shared these transmissions with his fleet commanders, all of whom agreed that the humans represented no significant threat. Their ships were clearly designed for exploration rather than combat. Their military appeared to be undertrained and equipped for humanitarian missions rather than warfare, and their leadership seemed incapable of making quick decisions. The Zephyrian War Council decided to begin moving their invasion fleets toward the human system while maintaining the pretense of negotiation. They would give the humans a few more days to surrender voluntarily before demonstrating the futility of resistance through overwhelming force. Commander Welsh privately wondered why a species capable of achieving faster than light travel and advanced biotechnology would choose to remain so defenseless. But his concerns were dismissed by officers eager to add another easy victory to their records. The humans had shown them everything they needed to know, and conquest would be simple. Captain Morrison ended his first diplomatic session with genuine optimism about the future, while Admiral Kekstar began planning the most effortless military campaign of his career. 3 massive Zephyrian battle fleets moved through the void of space like dark storms approaching a peaceful shore. Admiral Kekstar commanded over 200 ships, each one bristling with enough firepower to level continents and reduce entire civilizations to ash. The alien commander felt confident as he watched his forces advance toward the human solar system, knowing that no species had ever survived contact with such overwhelming military might. Commander Amy Rodriguez sat in the command center of Earth Defense Command, surrounded by screens showing the approaching alien fleets. Her calm expression revealed nothing of the careful planning that had begun the moment Captain Morrison sent his first reports about the Zephyrian Empire. She maintained regular communication with the alien forces, always speaking in measured tones about diplomatic solutions and peaceful resolutions. Rodriguez had spent the past week coordinating with Admiral Peter Hayes of the Terran fleet, though. Their conversations appeared to focus on evacuation procedures and civilian protection rather than military strategy. To any observer, including Zephyrian intelligence monitoring their communications, it seemed like humanity was preparing for surrender rather than resistance. Dr. Kevin Brooks continued his cultural exchange with the aliens, sending them more information about human society while carefully studying everything the Zephyrians revealed about themselves. The xenobiologist had made disturbing discoveries about their new visitors, learning that the Zephyrian Empire had conquered 17 different species over the past century. The alien records that Brooks accessed through their diplomatic channels told a horrifying story of systematic conquest and exploitation. Species that proved useful as slaves were kept alive and forced to serve Zephyrian interests, while those deemed worthless were simply exterminated. Entire civilizations had been wiped from existence because they failed to meet alien standards for productivity and obedience. Captain Susan Miller commanded the science vessel UES Discovery, which had been conducting what appeared to be routine research missions throughout the solar system. Her ship regularly transmitted findings about asteroid compositions, solar radiation patterns, and magnetic field fluctuations. The Zephyrians monitoring these broadcasts saw typical scientific curiosity rather than recognizing the systematic mapping of defensive positions. Miller had discovered something that made her blood run cold during her investigations of Zephyrian technology. The aliens possessed weapons capable of sterilizing entire planets, turning thriving worlds into lifeless rocks within hours. They had used these devices on at least 3 occasions when conquered species attempted rebellion, eliminating billions of lives as examples to others. President Jonathan Pierce maintained his public image as a concerned leader seeking peaceful solutions to the alien crisis. His broadcasts to the people of Earth spoke of hope, diplomacy, and the importance of showing their visitors the best aspects of human civilization. He urged citizens to remain calm and trust in the negotiation process, appearing every bit the idealistic politician trying to solve problems through discussion. Behind the scenes, Pierce worked closely with Defense Secretary Maria Thompson to coordinate responses that would appear weak and disorganized to alien observers. They deliberately created the impression of a government struggling to make decisions, buying precious time while their real preparations continued in absolute secrecy. Colonel Danny Wright had spent years developing what appeared to be civilian infrastructure projects throughout the solar system. Mining stations on asteroids, communication relays near Jupiter, and research facilities on Mars all seemed like peaceful human expansion into space. The Zephyrians noted these installations, but dismissed them as examples of typical human inefficiency. In resource allocation, Wright knew that every day of apparent confusion and delay was allowing hidden systems to come online throughout human space. Defensive networks that had been disguised as commercial projects were running final diagnostics, while weapons platforms concealed within scientific equipment prepared for activation on his command. Dr. Brooks made one final attempt at genuine peace, transmitting comprehensive records of human history and achievements to Admiral Kekstar. He sent documentation of humanity's greatest works of art, literature, and music, hoping to demonstrate that his species had value beyond what the aliens might initially recognize. The historical records included detailed accounts of human conflicts throughout their development, showing how they had gradually learned to resolve disputes through negotiation rather than violence. Brooks emphasized humanity's recent centuries of peace and their success in eliminating warfare, poverty, and environmental destruction through cooperation and technological advancement. Admiral Kekstar reviewed these transmissions with growing impatience, seeing them as more evidence of human weakness rather than recognizing them as warnings. The historical accounts of something called total war seemed particularly absurd to the alien commander, who dismissed them as obvious fiction, created to make humans seem more threatening than they actually were. Commander Welsh found himself increasingly troubled by certain aspects of the human records, particularly references to military strategies and technologies that seemed far more advanced than what they were currently displaying. When he brought these concerns to his superior, Kekstar reminded him that inferior species often created elaborate fantasies about their past greatness to compensate for their current weakness. The Zephyrian intelligence officer had noticed that human evacuation procedures seemed unusually well organized for a species supposedly facing their first military crisis. Cities were being emptied with remarkable efficiency, and civilian populations were moving to designated safe zones with a level of coordination that suggested extensive prior planning. Captain Morrison continued his diplomatic efforts aboard the U's Harmony, maintaining regular contact with alien representatives while appearing increasingly desperate for a peaceful solution. His requests for more time to consult with Earth's leadership were growing more frequent, and his tone suggested mounting pressure from human authorities who were unprepared for the situation. The diplomatic vessel seemed to be operating alone in space, with no visible military escort or support fleet. Morrison repeatedly emphasized humanity's desire for friendship and cultural exchange, offering to share advanced medical technologies and scientific discoveries in exchange for peaceful coexistence. Admiral Hayes coordinated what appeared to be defensive preparations throughout human space, but his communications suggested a military force that was small, outdated, and designed primarily for peacekeeping rather than actual warfare. His ships seemed to be positioning themselves for evacuation assistance rather than combat operations. The alien invasion fleets crossed the outer boundaries of the solar system without encountering any significant resistance, confirming Kekstar's assessment of human military capabilities. A few small patrol craft fled at their approach, reinforcing the impression that humanity was incapable of mounting any serious defense against superior alien technology. As the Zephyrian forces approached their final positions for planetary assault, Commander Velsh filed one last report expressing concern about the humans' unusually calm behavior in the face of certain conquest, but his warnings were lost among the excitement of officers already discussing how they would divide Earth's resources among themselves. The Zephyrian invasion fleets swept into the inner solar system like a tide of destruction, their massive warships casting shadows across space as they moved toward their defenseless target. Admiral Kekstar stood on his command bridge watching the pathetic human response with satisfaction, seeing exactly what he had expected from such a weak and unprepared species. Captain Jake Morrison's diplomatic vessel U.S. Harmony appeared to panic as the alien fleets approached, sending desperate messages about the breakdown of negotiations and pleading for more time to reach a peaceful solution. The ship's erratic movement patterns suggested a crew that had lost all composure, fleeing toward Earth in what looked like complete terror. Morrison transmitted frantic communications to his government, speaking rapidly about the failure of diplomacy and the need for immediate evacuation of major population centers. His voice carried the strain of a man watching his life's work collapse as alien forces prepared to destroy everything he had tried to protect through peaceful means. The small escort of human vessels that had been accompanying the Harmony scattered like frightened animals at the first sight of Zephyrian battle cruisers. Admiral Kekstar noted with amusement how quickly the humans abandoned any pretense of military resistance, confirming his assessment that they possessed neither the weapons nor the courage to oppose superior alien technology. Captain Ryan Foster commanded the U.S. Defiance, one of the few human warships that seemed willing to engage the invading forces rather than flee in panic. His vessel charged toward the advancing alien fleet in what appeared to be a desperate last stand, its primitive weapons firing uselessly against Zephyrian shields, while enemy plasma cannons prepared to end the futile resistance. The battle was over almost before it began, with the Defiance taking devastating hits that left the ship spinning helplessly through space before finally exploding in a brilliant flash of light. Foster's final transmission spoke of duty and sacrifice, his voice cutting off abruptly as his vessel was consumed by alien firepower. Admiral Kekstar barely acknowledged the destruction of the human warship, considering it nothing more than an irritating delay in his advance toward Earth. Two of his own ships had suffered minor damage from the encounter, but the Defiance had been eliminated with embarrassing ease, proving that human military technology was centuries behind Zephyrian capabilities. The first wave of Zephyrian landing craft launched toward Earth's major cities, their hulls gleaming as they descended through the atmosphere toward targets that intelligence had identified as centers of human government and industry. The invasion force expected to find panicked civilians and overwhelmed defenders, preparing for the quick conquest that had become routine for the Empire. Landing parties reported strange findings as they approached their designated zones, discovering that human cities were being evacuated with remarkable efficiency and organization. Streets that should have been filled with chaos and terror were instead orderly rivers of civilians, moving toward designated safe areas with calm precision that seemed almost unnatural. Admiral Kekstar dismissed these reports as evidence of human herd mentality, assuming that the species simply followed evacuation orders without question because they lacked the intelligence to think for themselves. The orderly retreat actually made conquest easier by concentrating populations in areas where they could be more easily controlled. Commander Welsh found himself increasingly disturbed by the human evacuation patterns, noting that they seemed to follow pre-established plans rather than desperate improvisation. The intelligence officer observed that civilian movements were being coordinated by communication systems that remained fully operational despite the invasion, suggesting preparation rather than panic. Lieutenant Colonel Michelle Barnes commanded what appeared to be one of Earth's primary military installations, a massive complex that should have been heavily defended and prepared for siege warfare. Instead, when Zephyrian forces approached the base, Barnes emerged under a flag of surrender with her entire garrison laying down their weapons without firing a single shot. The surrender happened so quickly that Zephyrian ground commanders were surprised by the lack of resistance, but they attributed this to human cowardice rather than recognizing anything suspicious about the situation. Barnes and her soldiers were taken prisoner with an ease that reinforced alien assumptions about human military incompetence. Barnes spoke calmly to her captors about the futility of resistance and the importance of minimizing casualties on both sides, appearing to be exactly the kind of weak leader that the Zephyrians expected from such a peaceful species. Her cooperation in providing information about base layouts and defensive systems seemed to confirm that humans valued their own lives more than their freedom. The captured human soldiers displayed an odd mixture of resignation and calm that puzzled their guards, showing neither the terror nor the rage that conquered species usually demonstrated when facing enslavement or death. They answered questions about human military capabilities with apparent honesty, describing defensive systems that seemed laughably inadequate for planetary protection. Strange incidents began occurring throughout the invasion zone as Zephyrian supply lines encountered unexpected problems that seemed random rather than coordinated. Communication arrays suffered cascade failures that appeared to be equipment malfunctions, while landing craft developed navigational errors that sent them into areas with no strategic value. Admiral Kekstar received reports of these technical difficulties with mild irritation, attributing them to the inferior quality of equipment used by advanced scout units. The problems seemed minor and unconnected, hardly worth the attention of a commander overseeing the conquest of an entire planet. Supply ships found themselves dealing with cargo bay malfunctions that contaminated food stores and damaged critical spare parts, while transport vessels experienced engine problems that stranded them in empty space far from their intended destinations. Each incident appeared to be an isolated technical failure rather than part of any coordinated sabotage effort. Commander Welsh noted that the pattern of equipment failures seemed unusually concentrated around areas where human civilians had been evacuated. But his reports about potential sabotage were dismissed by officers eager to focus on the rapid completion of planetary conquest rather than investigating minor technical problems. Dr. Kevin Brooks had been captured during the initial stages of the invasion, taken prisoner aboard his research vessel along with several other human scientists who had been studying alien technology and culture. The xenobiologist appeared dejected and cooperative, willingly sharing information about human society and expressing regret that diplomacy had failed. Brooks spent hours answering Zephyrian questions about human psychology and social structures, providing insights that seemed to confirm alien assumptions about human weakness and inability to coordinate effective resistance. His detailed explanations of human peaceful nature and conflict avoidance mechanisms reassured his captors that the conquest was proceeding exactly as planned. The captured scientist expressed genuine sadness about the breakdown of communication between their species, speaking wistfully about the opportunities for cultural exchange and mutual understanding that had been lost due to human inability to accept their proper place in the galactic order. Dr. Kevin Brooks sat quietly in his detention cell aboard the Zephyrian command ship, watching Commander Welsh pace back and forth with growing confusion. The alien intelligence officer had been questioning him for hours about human behavior patterns, clearly disturbed by reports from the surface that didn't match their expectations of a conquered species. Brooks looked up at his captor with what appeared to be genuine sympathy, speaking in the same calm tone he had used throughout their conversations. He explained that everything the humans had shown the Zephyrians about their species was completely true, but it represented only one side of their nature, the side they preferred to show when meeting new friends. The xenobiologist described how humans had evolved as social creatures capable of great love and cooperation, genuinely caring for other living beings and working together to solve problems through peaceful means. This aspect of humanity was real and powerful, driving their art, science, and dreams of galactic friendship. However, Brooks continued with a slight change in his expression. Humans had also evolved as persistence hunters and survival specialists, developing abilities that allowed them to thrive in environments that would kill most other species. These traits had been carefully hidden during first contact because humans genuinely preferred peace to conflict. Commander Welsh demanded to know what Brooks meant by survival specialists, his voice carrying new uncertainty as equipment failures continued plaguing Zephyrian forces throughout the solar system. The human scientist smiled sadly and explained that his species had learned to use their creativity and empathy not just for building beautiful things, but for developing increasingly effective ways to eliminate threats to their survival. Far from the command ship, Captain Ryan Foster emerged from behind a massive asteroid, where his ship had been hidden using advanced stealth technology that made it invisible to Zephyrian sensors. The U's Defiance had never been destroyed, only concealed by holographic projections that created a convincing explosion while the real vessel moved to a predetermined ambush position. Foster's crew had spent days watching alien patrol routes and communication patterns, gathering intelligence while appearing to be nothing more than debris floating in space. Now they prepared to rejoin a battle that the Zephyrians thought had already ended, their weapons charged and targeting systems locked onto enemy vessels that had no idea they were being hunted. Admiral Peter Hayes commanded what the aliens believed to be humanity's entire space fleet, a small collection of outdated vessels that posed no serious threat to superior Zephyrian technology. The truth was that Hayes controlled thousands of ships that had been hidden throughout the solar system, disguised as civilian transports, research stations, and mining operations. The Admiral activated communication systems that had been built into what appeared to be commercial satellites and space habitats, revealing a coordination network that spanned from Mercury to Pluto. Every human installation that the Zephyrians had dismissed as peaceful infrastructure was actually part of a massive military grid that had been watching and preparing since. First Contact. Hayes spoke calmly to his distributed fleet commanders, using codes that had been embedded in routine civilian communications for weeks. Mining ships revealed advanced weapon systems, research stations deployed defensive shields, and transport vessels launched fighter craft that had been hidden in their cargo bays. Colonel Danny Wright sat in what the Zephyrians believed to be a captured Earth Defense Command Center, surrounded by alien guards who thought they were controlling humanity's primary military coordination facility. In reality, Wright was activating systems that had been disguised as civilian infrastructure throughout human space for years. Solar collection arrays that had seemed like peaceful energy projects suddenly reconfigured themselves into orbital weapons platforms capable of focusing starlight into devastating beams. Communication satellites revealed themselves as targeting and guidance systems for weapons that the aliens had never detected, while research facilities on distant moons began broadcasting new signals. The colonel's fingers moved across controls that appeared to be simple administrative terminals, but were actually linked to defensive networks that encompassed the entire solar system. Every human installation that had seemed vulnerable and poorly defended was transforming into a component of the most sophisticated military system the galaxy had ever seen. Lieutenant Colonel Michelle Barnes and her supposedly surrendered troops had spent their captivity gathering detailed intelligence about Zephyrian command structures, weapon systems, and operational procedures. The Marines had allowed themselves to be taken prisoner specifically to get inside enemy defenses and identify critical vulnerabilities. Barnes moved through the Zephyrian base with the quiet efficiency of a predator, her soldiers eliminating sentries and disabling communication equipment with techniques that no peaceful species would ever develop. The humans had studied their captors carefully, learning how to exploit weaknesses in alien psychology and technology. The Marines demonstrated something that none of the Zephyrians' previous conquests had possessed: the ability to function as individual units while maintaining perfect coordination with a larger strategic plan. Each soldier knew exactly what needed to be accomplished and how their actions fit into the broader objective of crippling alien command capabilities. Captain Susan Miller's science vessel used Discovery dropped its peaceful disguise to reveal weapon systems that turned Zephyrian shielding technology against itself, using the aliens' own defensive frequencies to create resonance patterns that tore their ships apart from within. Her crew had spent weeks analyzing captured alien technology to develop these specialized weapons. Miller's ship had never been conducting simple research missions, but had instead been systematically mapping every Zephyrian vessel and installation, creating detailed profiles of their strengths and weaknesses. The apparent scientific curiosity had been cover for the most comprehensive intelligence operation in human history. The Discovery began transmitting targeting data to hidden human forces throughout the solar system, coordinating attacks that struck at precise moments and locations calculated to cause maximum disruption to alien operations. Every piece of information the humans had gathered during their diplomatic charade was now being used to dismantle the invasion force. Admiral Kekstar found his carefully planned conquest turning into a nightmare as reports flooded in about impossible human capabilities and coordinated attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. His communications with fleet commanders were being disrupted by interference that appeared to be coming from human civilian installations. The alien admiral watched in growing horror as his supply lines collapsed under systematic sabotage. His landing forces were cut off by precisely timed attacks, and his command structure crumbled under assault from enemies that had supposedly been captured or destroyed. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were demonstrating military capabilities that exceeded anything in Zephyrian experience. Commander Welsh stared at Dr. Brooks, with new understanding, finally grasping that the humans had never been weak or unprepared, but had instead been conducting the most sophisticated deception in galactic history. The peaceful species he had dismissed as harmless was revealing itself to be the most dangerous opponent the Zephyrian Empire had ever encountered. Admiral Kekstar stood frozen on his command bridge as the tactical display showed his invasion force being systematically destroyed by an enemy that should not have existed. The 200 ships that had seemed like overwhelming force against a peaceful species were now trapped in a carefully orchestrated nightmare, with human vessels appearing from everywhere and nowhere to tear his fleets apart. The alien commander watched in horror as his mighty warships were picked off one by weapons that seemed to understand exactly how Zephyrian technology worked. Every shield frequency, every armor composition, every tactical doctrine that had brought the Empire victory across 17 conquered worlds was being turned against them by humans who had studied their enemies with terrifying precision. Kekstar tried to coordinate a retreat, but found that his escape routes had been systematically blocked by human forces that had been waiting in ambush for weeks. The mining ships and research stations that he had dismissed as harmless civilian infrastructure revealed themselves to be components of the most sophisticated military trap ever constructed. Captain Jake Morrison appeared on the main communication screen of the Zephyrian flagship, his diplomatic vessel now bristling with weapons that could sterilize entire planets. The human who had seemed so eager for peaceful friendship spoke with quiet authority about the choice that Admiral Kekstar now faced between withdrawal and complete annihilation. Morrison explained that humanity had spent the entire negotiation period preparing 17 different strategies for Zephyrian elimination, each one designed to exploit specific weaknesses in alien psychology, technology, and tactical doctrine. The diplomatic talks had never been about reaching an agreement, but about buying time to position forces and gather intelligence. The captain described how human analysts had studied every aspect of Zephyrian society and military capability, learning from the Empire's previous conquests to understand exactly how they operated and what methods would be most effective against them. Every conversation, every cultural exchange, every moment of apparent human weakness had been part of this comprehensive intelligence operation. President Jonathan Pierce addressed Admiral Kekstar directly, no longer maintaining the facade of a confused politician seeking peaceful solutions. The human leader spoke with cold precision about the consequences that awaited any species foolish enough to mistake human kindness for weakness or human cooperation for inability to wage effective warfare. Pierce revealed that humanity had been monitoring Zephyrian space for months before first contact, using stealth technology and intelligence methods that the aliens had never detected. Human agents had mapped every Zephyrian world, studied their defenses, and identified the locations of their families and civilian populations. The president explained that humans possessed detailed files on Zephyrian leadership, their personal histories, their loved ones, and their home worlds. Every piece of information needed to wage total war against the Empire had been gathered and analyzed, creating a targeting database that would allow humanity to eliminate Zephyrian civilization if necessary. Dr. Kevin Brooks provided the final psychological blow to the defeated aliens, transmitting comprehensive intelligence files that showed the depth of human preparation and the hopelessness of continued resistance. The xenobiologist who had seemed so eager to share human culture revealed that every cultural exchange had been designed to gather information about alien weaknesses. Brooks explained that humans weren't cruel by nature and genuinely preferred peaceful coexistence with other species, but they possessed an unmatched capacity for controlled violence when their survival was threatened. Their creativity, empathy, and cooperative instincts made them not weaker, but infinitely more dangerous than any species the Zephyrians had encountered. The scientists described how human evolution had produced a species capable of incredible cooperation during peacetime, but equally capable of unprecedented coordination during warfare. The same traits that made humans excellent partners in peace made them absolutely lethal enemies when threatened with extinction. Captain Ryan Foster's fleet emerged from hiding throughout the solar system, revealing that humanity's actual military forces numbered in the thousands rather than the dozens that the aliens had observed. The ships that appeared seemed to materialize from empty space, having used stealth technology and camouflage systems that made them invisible too. Zephyrian detection methods. Foster began hunting down the few remaining alien vessels with ruthless efficiency, his forces coordinating attacks that left no possibility of escape or survival. The human military demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceeded anything in Zephyrian experience, combining individual initiative with collective strategy in ways that overwhelmed alien command structures. The captain's hunting groups moved through space like packs of predators, using knowledge of Zephyrian psychology and technology to anticipate every move their enemies might make. No alien ship that attempted to flee was allowed to escape, ensuring that no intelligence about human capabilities would reach the Empire. Admiral Peter Hayes revealed the true scope of human military preparation as defensive systems throughout the solar system activated in perfect coordination. Every civilian installation that the aliens had dismissed as harmless infrastructure transformed into components of a military network that spanned from the inner planets to the outer. System boundaries. Hayes commanded orbital weapons platforms, disguised as solar collectors, communication networks that were actually targeting systems, and mining operations that had been secretly producing military equipment for years. The entire human solar system had been transformed into a fortress, without the aliens ever realizing what was happening. Colonel Danny Wright's command center revealed itself to be just one node in a defensive network that encompassed hundreds of installations throughout human space. The systems that had appeared to be vulnerable civilian infrastructure were actually the most advanced military technology that humanity had ever developed. Wright demonstrated how humans had learned to hide their most dangerous capabilities behind facades of peaceful development, using their natural creativity and technological skill to develop weapon systems that no aggressive species would ever anticipate. The peaceful nature that the aliens had mocked was actually the perfect camouflage for military preparation. Commander Welsh found himself imprisoned on a human facility that had appeared to be a simple research station, but was actually a sophisticated intelligence center. The Zephyrian officer finally understood why his species had suffered such complete defeat, recognizing that they had been outmatched not by superior technology, but by superior thinking. Welsh realized that humans represented something the Zephyrian Empire had never encountered before, a species that could wage total war while maintaining perfect discipline and coordination. The aliens had conquered other species through superior firepower and ruthless tactics, but humans had defeated them through superior planning and psychological warfare. The few surviving Zephyrian ships that attempted to flee discovered that escape was impossible, with human forces controlling every exit from the solar system. Admiral Kekstar faced the choice between surrender and watching his remaining forces be systematically eliminated by an enemy. That had turned the invasion into a comprehensive demonstration of human military superiority. Captain Morrison resumed his diplomatic broadcasts to the galaxy, once again transmitting messages of peace and friendship while human fleets quietly took positions to ensure that other species understood both the sincerity of their peaceful intentions and the absolute certainty of destruction that awaited anyone who chose to test their resolve.